1,500 feet below the surface of the Pacific lies a remarkably intact skeletal piece of aviation history. It rests in the crushing darkness, off the California coast. But it is not a seaplane, and it did not crash here from the deck of a normal aircraft carrier. What the sonar picked up first was a massive, tangled field of strange duralumin lattice. It sat twisted and shattered across the fine gray sediment of the seabed, and sitting beside it, with rubber tires still intact, are 4 Curtiss F-9C Sparrowhawk fighter planes. The painted star insignia is still visible on their wings. They are sitting at the bottom of the ocean, but they were never designed to land on water or on land. They were designed to launch from and recover to a massive flying mothership, a 785-foot rigid airship. It was an airborne aircraft carrier, a marvel of engineering that the United States Navy believed was the future of global warfare until the evening of February 12, 1935. That was when something catastrophic happened. In the storm clouds off Point Sur, a nearly 800-foot leviathan of the sky does not simply fall out of the clouds. To understand the sheer scale of the USS Macon, look at what it was built to replace. It was not merely an aircraft, it was a flying naval base. At 785 feet long, it was nearly the size of the Titanic. Inside its immense duralumin skeleton, 12 internal gas cells held over 6 million cubic feet of helium, but its true purpose was hidden deep inside its belly. The Macon was built with a specialized internal hangar. It was designed to deploy and recover a fleet of Curtiss F-9C Sparrowhawk fighters entirely in mid-air. Using a mechanical trapeze, the biplanes would match the airship's speed and hook on. Then they were hoisted directly up into the hull, a mechanical ballet executed high above the Pacific. On February 12th, the commander guided the Macon back from a routine fleet exercise. They were operating off the coast of Southern California. The ship turned north toward its home base in Sunnyvale. The weather report was standard for the winter season. There was no indication of the unseasonably violent squall line rapidly forming near Point Sur. They were flying straight into a wall of severe, focused wind shear. As the Macon approached Point Sur, the coastal squall intensified into a focused updraft. The airship was suddenly caught in a severe crosswind. Over 700 feet of internal structure began to flex, but the true danger was not the storm itself. It was a documented structural flaw. During a previous flight over Texas, the upper tail fin had sustained damage. The Navy knew the duralumin rings in the tail were compromised, but the permanent repairs had been delayed. At exactly 5:05 in the evening, that weakened metal finally gave way. There was a sudden deafening crack, failure. The entire upper fin sheared cleanly away from the hull. The jagged metal tore directly into gas cells 1 and 2. Millions of cubic feet of helium began to vent out into the rain. The aft section instantly lost its buoyancy, and the crippled silver leviathan pitched violently nose up into the dark. With the upper fin gone, the Macon was no longer flying, it was falling. But it did not drop like a stone. Because its forward gas cells were still intact, it became a massive, uncontrollable pendulum. Inside the control car, the commander ordered an immediate disciplined response. The crew rapidly dumped fuel and ballast water, fighting to slow their descent. For 20 slow minutes, the crippled airship drifted downward through the fog. The crew calmly put on their life jackets. But as the control car neared the dark water, the radio man panicked. He jumped from the gondola, while it was still entirely too high above the waves. He disappeared into the fog and was never seen again. Moments later, the massive duralumin frame finally struck the surface. The survivors scrambled out into the freezing water, and they watched in silence as the 785-foot hull slipped beneath the boiling surface. For 55 years, the exact location of the wreckage remained unknown. Then, in 1990, The Navy and the Research Institute (MBARI) returned to Point Sur. They deployed remotely operated vehicles down into the crushing pressure of the abyss. Finding the scattered debris field at 1,500 feet was incredibly difficult. The organic materials had long since decayed. The silver canvas was completely gone. But the metal remained. First contact was a massive tangle of duralumin lattice, emerging from the pitch-black water. Harsh tungsten lights illuminated a skeletal debris field, stretching endlessly across the gray sediment. The twisted frames of the gas cells lay half-buried in the marine snow. But the search team was looking for something else. The pilots slowly panned their cameras through the abyssal gloom. They swept the edge of the wreckage until the harsh light finally stopped on the sharp geometry of a painted five-pointed star. At the far edge of the debris field, the submersible cameras illuminated a ghost. Sitting upright on the abyssal floor were the 4 surviving Sparrowhawk fighters. The organic fabric of their wings had rotted away, but the aluminum skeletons remained perfectly articulated in the dark. The rubber landing tires were completely uncrushed by the immense pressure. Inside the open cockpits, the glass dials of the instrument panels were still legible. These tiny biplanes were the surviving artifacts of a failed dream, because the crash of the Macon did not just destroy a single ship. It killed the entire concept of the airborne aircraft carrier. The United States Navy never built another one. 81 men rode the USS Macon down into the freezing Pacific and lived. The radio man who jumped too soon into the fog did not. Today, the bones of the greatest flying machine the Navy ever built remain in the crushing dark, alongside the biplanes that will never fly again. It is a skeletal, frozen monument to an era when we tried to build castles in the sky before they sank into the dark.